वेलकम टू आवर नेशन स्टेट डायलॉग सीरीज राष्ट्र राज्य संवाद श्रृंखला में आप सबका स्वागत है. 欢迎收看民族国家对话系列. I'm Dr. Geeta Kochar, moderator for today's discussion. Today it's our pleasure and privilege to have with us Major General B Asthana, a veteran infantry general with over 400 publications and 45 years of experience. Though I don't need to give a great introduction for him because everyone knows about him, but just a brief, outline about him is he's currently the Chief Instructor at USI, the oldest think tank of India. He's also at the Governing Council of CEE, on Advisory Board of Global Advisors Consultants Corporation, Security Council of International Organization of Education Development, a consultative body of ECOSOC, representing in UN headquarters, Vienna and Austria. He is the former Director General of Infantry in Indian Army and Head of Training Team in Defense Services Staff College, Wellington. He had also worked with the UN and holds 2 MPhil degrees and a research scholar, PhD in JNU, which he's continuing. He has many accolades, got a lot of awards. Twice he was awarded by the President of India, twice awarded by the UN, and awarded by CE Excellence Award for Nation Building by the Governor of Haryana, twice awarded by IOED for International Diplomacy and Global Conflict Resolution, and many more. I mean, I can go on and on. But just let's start our discussion today. And very warm welcome to you, sir, to this Nation State Dialogue series.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me begin with a very stark statement of US President Joe Biden on Pakistan, terming it as the most dangerous nation in the world, as it has nuclear weapons without question. In your opinion, what are the factors behind such a statement, and how does it work for India?
Firstly, we have to see this statement in context. Now, this statement has come after a couple of incidents which took place, that United States agreed to maintaining the F-16 fleet of Pakistan. Army Chief of Pakistan was in United States, and also their ambassador went to POK and called it Azad Kashmir. Now, all these 3 events did not go well with India, and we did lodge a démarche on that, and our unhappiness was also conveyed to the government. But at the same time, when Joe Biden made this statement that Pakistan is a dangerous country and referring to its nuclear insecurity and things like that, now this was to give a message to both of us. One was to India that, no, I do follow your line in some manner. And another was to Pakistan that you cannot take us for granted. These were the 2 subtle messages. But let me get the bigger picture right, because basically all these dilemmas and dichotomies in the United States statement, because subsequently the statement was also, I would say, redrawn back by the State Department. After 2 days, they said, no, we have very good relations with Pakistan and things like that. So therefore, there is a bigger picture. Now, the bigger picture is that after United States lost its footprints in FPAC region, there is a serious concern in the United States that if IS becomes stronger, if Al-Qaeda becomes strong, we will have to tackle them. Now, how do we tackle them? We do not have a route from Iran because there are adversarial relations. The only place which can be used is Pakistan. The strategic location and strategic space of Pakistan is very important. The way they have killed Zawahiri, there are alleged, shall I say, statements to say that Pakistan airspace was used and intelligence of Pakistan was also used. And therefore, Pakistan needed to be compensated in some manner. So there was a quid pro quo and they agreed to F-16 deal. Now, this F-16 deal or the maintenance deal, unlike many in the media are not too sure about it, let me tell you in no uncertain terms, America is not paying for it. It is Pakistan which is paying for it as far as the maintenance is concerned. The only thing is even the maintenance was banned during Trump era, which has now been agreed upon by Joe Biden. So this is the change. So considering that, they would like a working relationship with Pakistan to continue. knowing fully well that Pakistan as of now is a vassal state of China. And Chinese influence because of the debt trap which Pakistan has gone into is tremendous. And also the same strategic space is also very relevant for China. So therefore, making that strategic space or giving it totally to China may not be a strategic gain for United States. So it will like to have its footprints. And if it has to pay some cost for those footprints, it is ready to do so. As far as India is concerned, they also want to make a balance with India, because they know that if they have to subsequently tackle China, they need India. So they cannot totally annoy India as well. So that is why you will find that there is a dichotomy. Sometimes somebody is saying something, their action is suggesting something else. So this is the logic for all these 3-4 statements or 3-4 acts which United States did, in my opinion.
I mean, in some sense, yes, we do see a subtle change in US policy towards Pakistan, where US was all out supporting Pakistan, and even for Taliban, for Al-Qaeda, it has taken help of Pakistan, and India was on the sideline. Somewhere, US has tilted towards India. Maybe, of course, certain relations it has to maintain, especially in relation to China, as you mentioned. But let me ask about, China, as you just pointed about China. But China-Pakistan, all with a friendship, has recently turned into a unified potential threat for India, which many strategists look with the possibility of two-front war. How do you assess the situation now, especially after the abrogation of Article 370? How has India made strategic planning to deal with these two neighboring powers, and what will be the challenges?
Firstly, when we talk of Sino-Pak relationship, I would say that Pakistan is a low-cost nuisance creator against India and a strategic asset for China. As far as China is concerned, it is a high-value security guarantor for Pakistan. Now, that is the relationship which they suffer. It's an equal relationship wherein Pakistan has no leverage. All leverages are with China. And we know that China invested about 46 billions to start with, or 42 billions to start with. Then subsequently it became 62 billions. And then when Pakistan has to pay, it becomes more than 80 billions is what they have to pay. So they are very deeply in debt as far as China is concerned. At the same time, whatever China has invested, bulk of the investment is exploitation of Pakistan, because bulk of the investment was in energy. Energy being produced is so costly that Pakistan can't buy it. The energy will go back to China and will be utilized in Xinjiang. That is what the Chinese game plan is. So therefore, people call it China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. I call it China-Pakistan Exploitation Corridor. So this is the relationship. So it's an unequal relationship. Now, when we talk of two-front war, the kind of Chinese influence which is growing in Pakistan, it is basically one elongated front, because Pakistan will not and dare not do anything unless China wants it to do something. Now, when we were in standoff with China, at that point of time, many strategists were saying that maybe that Pakistan can take advantage, or Pakistan may take advantage. And at that point of time, and Pakistan did not take advantage. And then I told them in no uncertain terms that let's be very clear, China has told them just to lay off. It's as simple as that. Because standoff with India can become, and all three are nuclear countries, China, India, Pakistan. So standoff in India, if the escalation dynamics is not controlled, it can be very dangerous. And China knows it. So therefore, China would like to keep all the levers of escalation dynamics under its control. And irresponsible Pakistan can do anything nonsense. So they will not let them to interfere and create, because now it is up to China when they want to escalate and when they don't want to escalate. So they wanted to keep it for themselves. That's one part of it. As far as the two-front war is concerned, yes, it's not the question of two-front. The issue is that, yes, now Chinese have an access to a number of regions of Pakistan. And from there also threat can be built up. Like in certain regions in Gilgit-Baltistan and in certain regions in POK, that is opposite Siachen and the area near our northern borders, there are Chinese footprints there. Now, these Chinese footprints and Chinese infrastructure which is coming up there is a cause of concern, because that means that can be utilized. Also, you would have heard earlier as well that the Chinese airfields there have a slight disadvantage of altitude. But then if they use certain airfields of Pakistan and certain infrastructure of Pakistan, it can be of use. And also, if nothing else, at least Pakistan can be used to create a higher intensity of terrorism at that point of time when China wants to engage India in some manner, in a perhaps whether it is conflict or standoff or something like that. So therefore, India has to take care of both the fronts. There is no doubt about it. Now, at the same time, the Chinese capacity building has grown manifold. Their in terms of pure numbers of arsenal and the soldiers or the military assets, including the naval assets which they have, is much more than India. But when we do a balance, or when we do our war games, we do work out as to what actually can be applied. There is no doubt that China has much more military assets, but the fact is that China has borders with maximum number of countries, more than any other country in the world. It is also a fact that they have bigger tensions in South China Sea and Taiwan Strait. So they have to cater for situations there. So therefore, when we calculate, we find that the terrain friction of Himalayas is a very big moderator, because all what they have cannot be applied because of the terrain restrictions in Himalayas. Like Russians found it very difficult to overcome the terrain friction caused by the built-up areas of Kiev and all these areas. Because Ukraine used built-up areas to their advantage. Now we have an advantage that we can use terrain friction of Himalayas to our advantage. And when it comes to the maritime domain, we can use whether it is Andaman Nicobar or the maritime space to our advantage, because there is when Chinese ships and even the trade ships are into Indian Ocean, they are almost about more than 1,500 kilometers away from the mainland. So therefore, the power of China in Indian Ocean reduces to that much, to that amount. So therefore, when we are comparing, it's not what China has, it is what China can apply against us. And now when we calculate what they can apply against us, we can perhaps take care of that in military terms. But we need tremendous amount of capacity building. We have a very serious disadvantage in infrastructure, because terrain on their side is very good, terrain on our side is not so good. It's very difficult. So therefore, we have to create laterals, we have to make laterals. If they are making villages, we have to make villages on our borders. If they are making roads, we should also make roads. If they are getting the 5G communication, we should also do so. If they are passing national security law to give more freedom to PLA on borders, we should also pass a similar law, at least put ITBP under army to have a little integrated border management situation. So we also need to do a lot, and therefore we need to do capacity building. And also our vulnerabilities, today's war is not one dimension or two dimension or one front or two front war. It is a multi-dimensional, multi-domain warfare. And we are already at war in a manner that China has launched a fair amount of economic offensive, digital offensive, information offensive on India. Now we have to take care of that as well. We find that we are not that well equipped economically for economic war, unfortunately. And therefore, when we look at the responses, even in the military side, lot many people ask us, can't we go and we also go and sit in Chinese territory? Yes, we can. Why not? Because it's such a huge border, everybody cannot be strong everywhere. So what they do in the encroachment, shall I say incremental encroachment against India, we can also do it. But the problem is that the moment they stop the raw materials coming to India, the Indian economy, the loss which Indian economy suffers is more than what Chinese economy suffers. So therefore, there is a quid pro quo elsewhere also. So now when the government takes decisions, they have to look at multi-domain warfare and not one front or two front. But yes, as far as strict military terms are concerned, we can handle the threat, no doubt about it. But we need to be proactive. We need to do more capacity building so that we can pose a threat. So there is a difference between tackling a threat or defending from a threat and posing a threat. So yes, we need a little more capacity building to pose a credible threat of which China can be scared of and doesn't do at its own will. Because overall aim of China is that it should be a China-centric Asia, and India should remain pitted at position number 2 in Asia. And therefore, it will not like India to grow beyond a point. And therefore, Pakistan finds utility because more is the amount of terrorism, more is the social. Now, the terrorism has also now extended into creating social disharmony, because the terrorists have now discovered, and China has also discovered, that it pays much greater dividend than killing some people. And more than that is that if these same terrorists can get into certain minority organizations and do the radicalization of some segments of Indian society and create societal, shall I say, disruptions that carries much more weight. So a number of social disruptions which you find happening in India are also a part of a greater strategy. So I think we need to look at multi-domain warfare beyond, and certainly we have to prepare for one front as well as two front war. As you mentioned.
I agree with you. I mean, now we are into a multi-dimensional war. It's not just about war on lands or war on airspaces or on sea. It's working, all encompassing kind of a thing, But you rightly pointed out terrorism as a major issue. And just recently, we have this report from, that China again hindered 4th time in the year to let at the UN to let India's proposition of labeling Pakistani terrorists as terrorists of UN. On that context, relating to that, let's talk about terrorism, which has been a major problem for India for decades. But China has always been a hindrance. So it's not the 1st time or the 4th time in this year or whatever. We have, China always stepping against India in terms of whatever propositions India made in UN for terrorists. So how do you see Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which also deals with terrorism as a core agenda, helped to India to raise its concern with China, especially when China itself is dealing with issues of Islamic terrorism in Xinjiang? What options and tactical ways India can use with the upcoming SCO presidency to tame cross-border terrorism and rope in China's support?
That's a very good question. I would put it this way, because many people ask us that SCO is a brainchild of China, is being dominated by China. Why should India be in it when China is doing so much against India? And my simple answer is, you cannot control the narrative of an organization unless you are yourself into it. So that justifies why we should be there. Because if we are sitting there, be rest assured that there will be no joint statement issued which is against Indian interest, because we will decline to sign that statement. So that is the reason why we need to be there. Now we're coming on to what best we can make out of the SCO presidency. Now, as far as SCO presidency is concerned, I must tell you that SCO is likely to get expanded. There are other countries who want to join, and there is no harm in doing so. For the simple reason, as you yourself mentioned in the earlier part of the question, that in UNSC, China is using veto power. So UNSC, unfortunately, has become a playground of P5 countries, wherein they can use veto whenever it suits them. And they can put certain, shall I say, proposals on technical hold, as it has been done in this particular case. when this terrorist was supposed to be designated, despite a proposal by USA and India. Now, unfortunately, United Nations Security Council is not getting reformed. It must get reformed before it becomes totally irrelevant. It is already irrelevant for the reason I keep saying in all my UN discussions that United Nations is a strong organization against weak countries and a very, very weak organization against P5 countries. Most of the international interventions, whether it is Iraq, whether it is Ukraine, whether it is Afghanistan, happened without UNSC sanction, and UNSC couldn't do a thing about it. So therefore, if UNSC has to become irrelevant, if UNSC refuses to reform itself, then obviously the regional organization will become important. Now, whether it is Quad, whether it is SCO, we need to be in both. If we have our hands in both, we can utilize both to our advantage. So that's the reason what justifies why India is in SCO and as well as India is in Quad. And India is also in BRICS, and BRICS is also getting expanded because there are a number of countries who want to get into BRICS. Now coming back to SCO, initially before India joined, China had tremendous amount of problems with EDIM. And at that point of time, they had passed a strategy called as a strategy of three evils. And they also have an organization to deal with the terrorists in SCO. There is a separate subset organization which also deals with the terrorists. I think it is RATS. Now, this is, so therefore, it's not that they are not concerned about terrorists, but they want to use the power which they have in UNSC of technical hold as a leverage, as a political leverage against India as well as the West. So this is a political leverage, which is to give a message to India that if you think that you can get closer to US, and if you and US both can put a proposal jointly, I still have the leverage to put it off the table. So this is more of a message on that of that kind. At the same time, there is also a Chinese interest involved. Now, as I mentioned in response to your last question, that China has strategic investment in Pakistan, and therefore there will be many Chinese in Pakistan. And if they have to protect that, they know that the terrorists in Pakistan itself are targeting Pakistan army, and the number of casualties which Pakistan has by terrorist actions is even more than India, if you pick up the statistics. So there is no way that Chinese could be safe there. Now, if Chinese need to be safe there, they are ready to pay and favor some of the terrorist groups as a quid pro quo. So when they are looking at LET, perhaps they don't mind striking a deal with LAT that you don't touch Chinese and we will try and defend you as much as we can. So that can also be one of the reasons why they are trying to perhaps favor some of these terrorist groups. But as I say, even US was also following this policy. They were also not looking at the terrorist group which were targeting India in past. And so long it was not affecting them. But the moment they had their movement of 9/11 movement or whatever, at that time their whole psychology changed. So I think the day there is a major terror strike in China, that is the day China will learn its lessons, and that is the day China will back off these terrorists, because till now China has not learned a lesson. Whatever terrorism was there in Xinjiang, they have tried to handle it with an iron fist. To some extent, they have been successful also, notwithstanding the criticism, because criticism by United Nations, by the rest of the world community, doesn't matter to China, the kind of regime they have there. So they are not bothered about the criticism part of it. But they have been able to control major escalation of terrorists in China. And when I have been visiting China, lot many people say so, that bulk of their population is in southeast region. 90% of population stays in southeast of China, if you divide China into two. And most of the people in southeast, they were saying that as compared to any other country, I think the number of terrorist incidents are hardly any in China. So we have been able to control terrorism to a great extent. So nobody should lecture us as to what we should do with terrorists. So this is the kind of discussions which and the narrative which they are selling to their people. Similarly, there are lot many people who keep talking about China's implosion and China's this thing. When I analyze it, Chinese have been able to stoke a spirit of nationalism also. And unfortunately, because of certain awkward policies of West, what has happened is they have been able to sell this narrative that one, the whole West has ganged up against us. They don't want China to rise. So therefore, we all need to get together and under a strong leader. And two, so therefore, there is a Western threat. That's one narrative. The second narrative is that all these protests which happen in United States, Black Lives Matter, or in India, or in Paris, or anywhere else, they highlighted tremendously in China to tell their Chinese citizens that the democracy is equally chaotic, if not more. So the kind of system which we are having is not too bad. Yes, you can't criticize Xi Jinping, you can't criticize CCP, etc., etc. But otherwise, you have a reasonably peaceful and nice life. So that is the way they are controlling their dissent. So this is the way China behaves, and China will continue to behave. As I said, they will keep shielding the terrorists till the time they have a terrorist strike. And I've already answered as to why we need to be in SCO to suit our interest or to promote our interests. As far as presidentship is concerned, yes, everybody will be coming. We will also see some expansion of SCO during our tenure as president of SCO. We will also be perhaps seeing some expansion of BRICS, and both of them are important because with the sanctions which West has put on Russia, one thing has become very clear, that the international financial system is hostage to United States, and United States can tweak it to its advantage whenever it requires. Same is the case with the West. So therefore, there is a need for an alternate financial system. There is a need for being able to trade with some of the neighbors and some of the Asian countries in a system which is not totally dependent on SWIFT and totally dependent on dollarized economy. So therefore, all these alternate organizations have some relevance, and for India to be a partner into all these organizations will continue to be relevant. And that's perhaps the reason we are playing our cards the way we are playing. Professor.
I mean, I agree with that in the sense, BRICS, Saudi Arabia has already shown interest to join BRICS. In, SCO also, we are thinking about roping in, maybe, Iran will also join and some other countries will also join. So there is a lot of, this change or expansion that is happening. But in terms of China, in terms of terrorism, I remember one of the time, when the Kunming attack happened on the Kunming railway station, many of the Chinese scholars started to reponder about this terrorism issue. And there were voices, some of them, which were, of course, subtle voices, saying that we really need to learn from India how India has been able to tackle the issue of terrorism. As Dr. Jaishankar, our External Affairs Minister, has also pointed out at some, conference, I think in the Rasaina dialogue, he said that, India has been a barrier for many of the countries. Otherwise, terrorism would have expanded to Southeast Asia as well. So India has actually, been a protector for all of these countries, that terrorism has not expanded to this area. But you are absolutely right. I mean, China is able to deal with Xinjiang, Islamic terrorism in certain fashion. Yet it is not, it is not attacked in certain fashions as US has been to rethink its policy about, especially, Lashkar-e-Taiba or other, terrorist organizations, Mujahideen and whatever. But one of your recordings where I was listening to, and we are moving away from this terrorist issue, is a very significant proposition about the strategy to get back Pakistan into Indian territory. which in a sense means to revisit the history and reestablish Akhand Bharat as a notion. So how do you see it as possible, and what are the challenges to it? I mean, I would love to have this kind of a recombined kind of a territory when China is also talking about going back to its history and reunification with Taiwan, with Hong Kong, with Macau, whatever. I mean, having Akhand Bharat is definitely a very interesting proposition. But will this in any way guarantee peace for India or create more problems within India? I mean, we are seeing Hindu-Muslim divide within India, and the terrorist issue that we are talking about. It's going to be a real challenge. So how do you see that?
Responding to your question and the recording which you mentioned about, this recording was in a context. And the context at that point of time was that there was a rhetoric that we should take back POK. So as a professional, I gave that recording in a manner, I think that recording was on Beyond News, as to what does it amount to? Because making statements, there were statements by politicians, there were statements by many strategists who actually don't understand as to what does it amount. So it was in that context. I am certainly not in favor of violating anybody's territorial integrity, but POK belongs to us. There is no doubt about it, for the simple reason because POK, Gilgit-Baltistan, Shakshgam Valley and Aksai Chin, they are part of the territory which Maharaja Hari Singh had acceded to India. Now, that is a historical fact, and that is the Indian position, and I don't think there is any compromise on that. Now, when we talk of recapturing or retaking this territory, it amounts to the following. Firstly, we need to, for that to happen, there are certain preconditions. The first precondition is that the people in that area should be interested in joining India. The demography should be reasonably troubled so that they are unhappy, almost to an extent that as it happened in case of East Pakistan. If you recall 1971, you had tremendous amount of atrocities by Pakistan Army, and the demography and people there were so troubled that they wanted to become independent. In addition to that, not that the people in POK and Gilgit-Baltistan are not troubled, they are, but they are not organized in that manner as erstwhile East Pakistan was, because they had a very strong leader in terms of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who not only won elections in Pakistan, but he also in East Pakistan, then East Pakistan, but also the entire Pakistan. So that kind of leadership has not been seen in Gilgit-Baltistan or in POK. So you need a strong leadership which can galvanize the dissent. Firstly, so therefore there has to be a population, there has to be dissent, there has to be a leader to galvanize that dissent. And then you have to have the international opinion on your side. That if the whole world must agree that yes, POK belongs to you, and therefore if you try to retake it, it is a justified action. And then in addition to that, you have to build the capacity. Now, I also explained that if we do it much later and we wait for building the entire capacity, then the way Chinese are trickling into POK and making infrastructure there, it may well happen that there may be a change in demography, and also the Pakistanis also having declared that as their state and trying to tweak with the demography and all. The demography may not remain of the kind that it wants to join India. So if you are too late, then there may be a change in demography. If you are too early, you may not have the requisite capacity. So if we can tick all 4 or 5 boxes at one time, and the time is appropriate, you can't be too late, you can't be too early. So when the time is appropriate and all these things which I mentioned, they all match, that is the only time when you can take back POK. Taking back rest of the Pakistan, I don't agree. I mean, I don't have any such ideas of that kind. Because in the world of today, international order of today, when the borders have been defined, they are sacrosanct, and any encroachment into somebody else's territorial integrity is not in Indian interest. Also, we have enough population with us. We need to develop that population. We need a developed India. We need to remove poverty from India. We need a growth within India. We need a peaceful India. So, therefore, extension of territory is not in Indian interest. We have enough territory and we have enough people. So why should we be looking for additional territory? But what is ours, that we should not give it. It should not happen that somebody else also encroaches our territorial integrity or violates our territorial integrity. So therefore, when we are talking in context of POK, it's a different take. And when we are talking in context of Akhand Bharat or maybe Maurya dynasty Akhand Bharat or something like that, no, that I am not interested. I don't propagate that. I don't propagate the idea of China that if their ships were sailing in South China Sea, that does not give any logic that South China Sea belongs to China or that becomes China's lake. Now that logic we don't agree, and if we don't agree to their logic, obviously nobody else will agree to our logic. If we say that okay, Myanmar sometimes belong to us, India, or Sri Lanka belong to India, now that I don't think that is a logic. And India has settled border with these countries, with Bangladesh, with Sri Lanka. We have settled maritime borders at times to our disadvantage, but we gave a concession so that we have a peaceful border and we have a peaceful settlement of border. So we have come a long way. Unfortunately, these two are the settling of these two borders is a historic problem. One is when it comes to China, China is not interested, and there was no border defined between independent India and China. The border was between British India and Tibet. So therefore, there is fair amount of ambiguity which both sides are playing to their advantage, and the positions are so hardened that nobody, no political dispensation, whether in China or in India, can make any concessions on that. So that is where we are stuck with a situation that border issue is not getting resolved both ways. As far as Pakistan is concerned, yes, we did sign a line of control, which was supposed to be temporary, which is temporary. And as per, even if when Pakistan keeps referring to the UN regulation or UN resolution, the first part of that resolution says that Pakistan must vacate and China must vacate. So both of them are supposed to vacate the erstwhile territory of Maharaja Hari Singh. So unless they vacate, nothing else happens. So therefore, technically, we are well within our rights. And that is the reason why even in our parliament, as well as in Jammu and Kashmir Assembly, we had left seats for POK and we have left seats for Gilgit-Baltistan. So the fact is that we have never given up our claims to these two areas. And these claims are alive and will continue to be alive. Whether, if and when we have all those boxes which I mentioned, when all those requirements are met, then and then only we can go in for such kind of action. So even the video recording was basically to tell people actually what it involves, and therefore when the rhetorics are being aired, then the rhetorics also must talk sense or must be sensible, that what can be achieved and what cannot be achieved.
Yeah, sometimes ultranationalists go ahead of it, but the fact of India is India has never been an expansionist power, and it does not believe in that. So therefore, I mean, the kind of thinking that Pakistan would be reunited with India, I don't think so. Even if Pakistan's economy is doing very bad, people are really suffering. I mean, it's their problem; they need to deal with it. Sri Lanka dealt with it. How it deals with it, it's up to them. But India can only extend some kind of support. With Pakistan, probably that is also very difficult. But let's talk about, just mention about the border problem. And this is my last question to you. Is with the possibility of Chinese President Xi Jinping as the unopposed and unchallenged leader for third term when this 20th Party Congress is going on, What challenges you foresee for our future relations, especially considering we have yet to resolve the border dispute? We don't even have an LOC with China, and the McMahon line is very ambiguous, as you were just mentioning. So even after 16 round of Corps commanders meeting, we are not able to resolve anything on this border. I mean, a concrete resolution hasn't come out. Though we have stepped back in many places, starting from PP15, we have stepped back. So how do you see, our future relations where people are saying that Xi Jinping will become more aggressive or maybe more authoritative and whatever? So how are we planning to do? What do you foresee for that?
See, as an analyst, I would give a balanced view. People who are saying that Xi Jinping will be more aggressive also need to know that Xi Jinping is quite an intelligent person, and he has also learned fair amount of lessons from Ukraine war.
Yes.
So I think he will not lose his balance beyond a point. As far as the aggressiveness is concerned, in my opinion, if he was to be aggressive on Taiwan issue, then earlier when he did all those kinds of military drills, that time also people were asking that perhaps he will now retake Taiwan, or he will use this as an excuse, or Pelosi's visit as an excuse to reunify Taiwan or something like that. There is a problem there as far as Taiwan is concerned. So his aggressiveness in context of Taiwan, I will put it this way, that he will continue to talk that I will not denounce the use of force, but he will not use the force. The reason is that Taiwan's economy is already, bulk of their investments are already with them. It's not easy to take Taiwan, because it was easy to take Hong Kong. The leader was aligned to CCP, and they did not have military, and they had security forces which were also aligned to PRC. Whereas in case of Taiwan, the leader, it is a democratic system. The leader is not aligned to CCP, and they have the defense forces which have the latest and the most modern equipment at par with NATO. So therefore, it's not easy, and they are also quite determined. I have been to Taiwan, and I have been there for a fairly long time, and I have seen their defense forces. Let me put it in no uncertain terms that they can hold on to even Chinese military aggression at least for 2 to 3 months, and that will be good enough for rest of the world to create enough problems for China. Now, Xi Jinping will not take that chance. So what he's actually looking for is that when he says that I will use force, and his aggressiveness and his demonstration of firepower is to ensure that US does not recognize Taiwan as a country, number one. Number two, US does not nuclearize Taiwan. And as far as Taiwan is concerned, it does not, or message to rest of the world is, don't accept Taiwan in United Nations or things like that. He wants to prevent that and hope that the DPP government, that is Saivin, she loses elections and KMT comes to power. And if KMT comes to power, then his problems are resolved, because KMT has been aligned to CCP in past, and they did not have much problems. They have problems only when DPP comes to power, whether it was in times of Chen Shui-bian or it is now. And for their unfortunate for China is that Saivin won 2 elections in a row. So that's the reason. And I think they will wait for the next election, as far as my assessment goes. As far as India is concerned, they know what India is capable of. They also know India is a nuclear power. They also know that India is a fairly strong country when it comes to nationalism. So they will try out what they have been trying, is called something which I have been writing as a strategy of incremental encroachment, which they have displayed in South China Sea, and which they have also displayed in our borders. We all know, as I mentioned a little while earlier, that there is no border treaty between independent India and China, and the previous ones they don't agree, which was between British India and Tibet. And they refer to those treaties only when they want to get some advantage out of it. Like during Doklam, they started referring to 1890 to fix the position of Gipmo Chin. because with that treaty, they were thinking that perhaps they can push the tri-junction towards Indian side. So this is how they use these treaties. Otherwise, they don't recognize them. That's one part of it. The second part is, as far as the LAC is concerned, there are different perceptions, as we all know. And at places wherever there are perceptions differ or wherever there is an overlap in perceptions, we both patrol. And both the sides, they call it an aggression from our side and we call an aggression from their side. And what they have been doing is they have been proactive. If you see from last 40, 50 years, somehow we have been reactive because all actions they take and then we react. Sometimes we react violently. Sometimes we reacted violently in 1967. Sometimes we react not so violently, which has been happening in many other cases. But basically, the initiative has always been with China. We will need to develop capacities so that we can take initiative sometimes. We took, although it's also a reaction, the action which we took in Kailash range, but then it was a offensive action, or it was an action where we were proactive, and it paid its dividend because it was because of the action at Kailash range that they went back. Earlier, otherwise they were trying to build permanent structures. So now what has happened is a disengagement has taken place, de-escalation has not taken place. And therefore, we cannot put our guard down. And we also need to continue capacity building so that we can give befitting responses whenever Chinese do any act of that kind. As far as Xi Jinping is concerned, his getting re-elected was on the card, even when in the last meeting 5 years back, when the term was extended, when the restrictions on the 2 terms was waived off. So it was known that he is going to take on the third one as well. Although during Xi Jinping's era, the economy has not done as well as his 2 predecessors, but he has got the best limelight or got the best out of the system for 2 reasons. One, he was able to crack down on corruption, which gave him a lot of popularity. And 2, he was able to stoke the spirit of nationalism in some manner. And that has overcome some of the follies which he has done, for which people are angry with him. And that is, one is economy, and second is zero COVID policy, and some other actions which have not gelled well with the people. But the fact is, the people of China, unlike what we tend to believe, they have maximum number of PhDs. The maximum number of tourists are going from China. So they have seen all the rest of the world, and they have also seen how democracies function. So it's not that they are unaware of the freedom and democracy. But the only thing, as I mentioned in the beginning of this interview, was that Xi Jinping has very smartly given them a hope that if you do not do 2-3 things, that is, don't criticize Xi Jinping, don't criticize CCP, and don't challenge the rule, any rule made by CCP. If you don't do these 3 things, life is fairly free, because they don't enter into, shall I say, personal freedom of their citizens. And if, to add, if they can keep growing well economically, then people are ready to sacrifice their so-called freedom, which, as we perceive in our wisdom. So that is why people keep saying that it is a boiling pot, and Xi Jinping has put a very hard lid. Yes, there is a boiling pot. There is a very hard lid. There are disgruntled elements. But unless Xi Jinping and PLA falls apart, the implosion theory is not working for them. And Xi Jinping will continue to be strong so long he remains chairman of CMC, he remains chairman of Politburo, and he is the president. So he is chairman of everything. And let's see after this meeting ends as to if he has shed out some appointments. He will certainly have a major turnover and try to remove most of his competitors in the next, shall I say, constitution of the Congress, as well as of the Politburo. So we will have to wait and see as to who has got in and who has got outside. But Xi Jinping will remain assertive. His goals are still intact. In his initial speech, he has restated all those goals which he restated earlier. And I think he will keep working towards that. As far as India is concerned, I think he will be a little more careful in being aggressive with India.
Yeah, I mean, at the border, we really need to relook at whether we'll have a de-escalation or not. That is the point, because many of the people have always been saying, like, India never had the border with China. I mean, we only had border with Tibet, so let's deal with Tibet. But that's not possible in the current circumstances. What we are talking about is China with, Tibet. So I think that would be a very core issue to look into. But if Xi Jinping continues with all the three posts, which some people are, speculating, maybe he'll be one of the highest positions. But if he continues with all the three positions, the metrics that we are going to deal with China is going to remain the same, or maybe a little more, assertive in that sense. Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure listening to you. I mean, we can continue our talk, but we have a limited time. And so thank you very much, Major General Asthana ji. Hope we continue our interactions. And to our viewers, keep watching our programs. If possible, please subscribe to our channel and keep learning from us. Namaste.